So to start off with this Kubernetes 101, you're going to need to create a Kubernetes cluster. And to do that today, we're going to use GKE, the Google Kubernetes engine from Google Cloud Platform. And to get that going, we're going to start by going to the Google Cloud Console. And you can get that at console.cloud.google.com. If you need to go through the process of signing up for an account, go ahead and walk yourself through that. It's pretty straightforward, and Google gives you quite a bit of free credits when you first start out, so you should be able to run this for free in its entirety. But if you start by going to the hamburger in the upper left-hand corner, drop down, and you can scroll down and see Kubernetes engine, and we're going to want to click on clusters. You'll see it come up, and you can see that I don't have any clusters created right now, so I'm going to start by clicking Create Cluster. So it brings up a menu of a bunch of different options that you can choose. For us, the defaults are mostly okay. In this case, because we are working on some free credits that Google has given us, we want to minimize our costs. So on the left-hand side, you're going to click on Your First Cluster. And then down at the bottom, you'll see a blue button, and you're going to go ahead and click Create. If you want to mess around and look at advanced options, you can certainly do that. As you start to get more advanced in administration of Kubernetes, some of this stuff will be a lot more meaningful to you. But for our purposes today, we're just going to use the defaults. So we go ahead and click Create. And you'll see kind of over here towards the center left of the screen, you'll see sort of a spinning bar. And that is the process of your cluster creating. It's important to remember that there's a lot that Google does for you behind the scenes when you create a Kubernetes cluster. If you've ever created one from scratch, you'll know exactly how much goes into it. So it'll take just a minute for all of that to come up. So now that that's complete, it should have taken somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes in order for your cluster to come up. And what you'll see is a green check mark right here, as well as the name of your cluster. Typically, if you just use the default settings from the previous screen, it will tell you, Google will name your cluster for you. In this case, it has named mine Your First Cluster -1. So once your cluster is up and running, there's 2 ways to verify that you can connect to it. Probably the easiest way is to use the Google Cloud Console. If you click on the Connect button over to the right, you'll see 2 things. You'll see a place where you can copy a gcloud command, and this operates under a few assumptions. Is that you have the gcloud command line utility installed, as well as you have the kubectl utility installed. If you don't have either of those installed, or you want to just get started a little bit quicker, you can see this blue button right here that says Run in Cloud Shell. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And what that's going to do is that's going to bring a Cloud Console up just in your browser. So if you scroll up, you should see that it brought up the Cloud Console, and it auto-populated here with the command that we're going to need in order to pull down the authentication file for our Kubernetes cluster. So if we just go ahead and run that command, just hit Enter. And it is run, and so we can run a few quick kubectl commands to verify that we can actually connect to our cluster. So the first one that we'll run is kubectl config current context, and if we run that, what that should do is that should echo back the current context that we have for connecting to a Kubernetes cluster. In the real world, you might have any number of clusters that you're connecting to at the same time, and you can use the kubectl config command in order to switch context between cluster. Be very careful if you're running this in like a production, where you're switching back and forth between production and like a development cluster, because you could have your current context pointing at production, and you mean to run something in development, and things could go poorly from there. So be sure to use the kubectl config current context command pretty liberally. So you can see that we're connected to the Kubernetes cluster that we just created, and we can verify that that Kubernetes cluster actually has space to work on if we run kubectl git nodes. And we'll talk a little bit more about what some of this stuff means as we get further into the 101, what the meaning of nodes is, how to find out more information about nodes, that sort of thing. But we can see right now that we have GKE, Your First Cluster -1, -pool1, and then a hash to signify the name of the node. So we can see that we have a Kubernetes cluster, we are indeed talking to it, and we can go ahead and continue on with the rest of this workshop, the rest of this 101, and be able to work against our Kubernetes cluster. All right, well, that's it for creating your first cluster. You're now up and running. Next up, we're going to talk about some of the history of Kubernetes and some primitives that you can expect to need to know in order to continue on and actually start deploying something to your cluster. Thanks.